Midnight Static Files. The story you are about to hear has its roots hidden in the darkness of reality. It's up to you to believe it or not.
Imagine entering a village where time doesn't flow like a river, but loops like a trap. In the morning, the local priest is a 60-year-old man with a dark beard. By the evening, he is a young man, decades younger, claiming his father died 10 years ago. This isn't just a strange dream. This is Kaliapani, a remote land where a government surveyor named Arundum is about to cross a boundary he was warned never to touch. A boundary where the living, the dead, and things that are neither, walk side by side. It was December 2021 when I first set foot in the deep, unforgiving forests of Odisha. The air in that region was biting, a heavy, bone-chilling cold that seemed to settle deep within your chest and refuse to leave. I was a government surveyor, sent to this remote tribal pocket called Kaliapani to map out the terrain for future development. It was a place untouched by the modern world. There was no electricity, no paved roads, and no cellular network. It was just us, a handful of camp staff, and the dense, silent forest that seemed to watch us from every angle. From the very first day, I felt an inexplicable, magnetic pull toward the local tribal temple. It sat on a rocky slope at the edge of the forest, a crude, weathered stone structure dedicated to the village deity, Ma Mangala. The goddess was not carved with the delicate grace of modern idols. She was sculpted from a rough, black stone, her body bearing the deep, jagged scars of time. Her features were designed to strike terror into the hearts of those who looked upon her. Her eyes were disproportionately large, perfectly round, and painted in a striking, blood-red hue. No matter where you stood in the temple courtyard, those unblinking eyes seemed to follow you, boring into your very soul. Her hair was a wild, tangled mass of stone, heavily coated in layers of dried red vermilion and yellow turmeric. A thick line of vermilion was drawn down her forehead, dripping down like a streak of fresh blood. Around her neck hung a withered garland of dried flowers and bitter neem leaves, emitting a strange, decaying fragrance. But it was her face that truly haunted me. On one side, she possessed a calm, maternal gaze. On the other, an expression of absolute, wild fury. Her lips were slightly parted, revealing sharp teeth and a protruding tongue, reminiscent of the goddess Kali. Under her feet, half buried in the earth, lay a small, smooth stone. The locals whispered that this stone was a sacred seal, holding down ancient, malevolent forces that had plagued the forest for centuries. The ground around the altar was stained with dried, dark blood from animal sacrifices, littered with cracked coconuts and blackened clay lamps. The air inside was a thick, suffocating mixture of burning incense, copper-scented blood, and old, damp stone. The villagers held a deep, fearful reverence for this place. They believed that on the night of the annual festival, the statue's stone eyes would truly come alive, and the boundary between our world and the unseen would dissolve entirely. As an educated man, a man of science and government order, I dismissed these stories as primitive superstitions. I smiled at their fears, confident that the world was governed by laws of physics, not ancient gods and spirits. But the forest has a way of breaking even the strongest minds. On my 14th day in the camp, I woke up at exactly 3:30 in the morning. It was my habit to rise early to walk, but that morning, the cold was different. It felt heavy, pressing down on the roof of our temporary quarters like a physical weight. The water I drew from the courtyard well was ice cold, sending sharp shocks of pain through my face as I washed. An intense, inexplicable feeling of dread settled in my stomach. Every instinct told me to crawl back under my blanket, to stay inside the safety of the camp. But a strange restlessness urged me forward. I grabbed my heavy metal torch, clicked it on, and stepped out into the freezing, pitch-black night. The path to the temple was a narrow dirt track, bordered on one side by the towering, silent trees of the forest, and on the other by an old tribal cemetery. At that time, There were no walls surrounding the graves, only a crude, rotting fence made of dry bamboo and thick, thorny bushes. As I walked, the silence of the forest became absolute. There was no sound of nocturnal insects, no rustle of leaves, nothing. The only sound was the heavy, rhythmic thud of my own boots hitting the frozen dirt, a sound that seemed abnormally loud in the quiet night. When I swept the beam of my torch across the bamboo fence, the light cut through the shifting shadows, revealing small, low mounds of earth inside the graveyard. In the darkness, those mounds looked terrifyingly like human bodies lying side by side, covered in a blanket of black soil. The sky above was a deep, velvet black, devoid of stars, carrying the heavy, suffocating darkness of a new moon. A sudden, freezing gust of wind swept through the forest, whistling through the gaps in the branches with a sound like a distant, agonizing hiss. From somewhere deep in the woods, the sharp crack of a dry branch echoed, making my heart leap into my throat. As I drew closer to the cemetery boundary, I stopped dead in my tracks. Through the whistling wind, I heard a sound. It was incredibly soft, a low, melodic whistling, almost like someone hummed a song to themselves in the dark. I held my breath, straining my ears to listen. The melody was haunting, an ancient tribal tune sung in a language I could not recognize. It was beautiful, yet filled with a profound, crushing sadness, a sound that felt like the cold, unshed tears of an old man drifting slowly through the freezing air. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding weak and hollow against the vastness of the forest. No one answered. The whistling continued, pulling at my mind, drawing me closer to the bamboo fence. My head felt heavy, as if a thick fog was settling inside my brain. I forced myself to swing the torchlight toward the edge of the graveyard, and that was when the beam illuminated a figure sitting on a large, weathered wooden platform. The figure was completely wrapped in a heavy black shawl, an old-fashioned turban resting on his head. His face was bowed toward the earth. "Thakar Mashi?" I muttered, recognizing the turban and the shawl. It was Vishveshvar Thakur, the temple priest. But why would he be sitting at the edge of a dark graveyard at 4 in the morning? I took a few steps forward, stepping off the path and approaching the platform. As the light of my torch fell directly on his face, my breath caught in my throat. The priest I had spoken to just 2 days ago was a man of about 60, with a rugged, dark beard lightly streaked with gray. But the man sitting before me now looked as if he had aged half a century in 48 hours. His beard was no longer dark, it was a shocking, dead white, resembling dry cotton. His cheeks had sunken deep into his skull, the pale skin stretched tight over his bones, giving him the appearance of someone who had been wasting away from a terminal illness for months. But the most terrifying part was his eyes. They were wide open, staring directly at me with a glassy, unblinking intensity. His eyelids did not flutter, not even once. He simply stared through me, as if looking at something standing right behind my shoulder. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thakar Mashi, why are you sitting out here in the cold? Come, let us go to the temple. It is freezing." He did not reply. Slowly, with agonizing deliberation, he stood up from the platform. The movements of his body were stiff, like a wooden doll being pulled by invisible strings. He turned his hollow face toward me, and in the dim light, I saw that the skin around his eyes was a deep, bruised black. Slowly, he raised his right hand, pointing a long, pale finger into the pitch-black depths of the cemetery. I looked in the direction of his finger before I could stop myself. At that exact moment, a thick, milky white fog began to rise from the road ahead. It was unlike any winter fog I had ever seen. It didn't drift or shift with the wind, it rose in a perfect, solid ring, hovering over the path like a living entity. And from deep within that frozen white circle, I heard a sound. It was a faint, chaotic whispering, dozens of overlapping voices muttering my name. A powerful, magnetic force seized my body. My limbs refused to obey my mind. Step by step, I began to walk toward that ring of fog, drawn in by an invisible, irresistible pull. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. I tried to drop the metal torch, but my fingers were locked around it. Suddenly, the light of the torch flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. The whispers grew louder, filling my ears, drowning out the sound of the wind. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me entirely was the old priest standing in the mist, a wide, terrifyingly peaceful smile spreading across his pale, dead face. I woke up to a cacophony of loud, chaotic voices and the bright, blinding glare of morning sunlight. I was lying flat on my back in the middle of a dirt road, my body aching as if I had been beaten. Several hands reached down, grabbing my arms and pulling me to my feet. As I stood up, swaying, I looked around, and my mind completely fractured. The village of Kaliapani was gone, or rather, it had been replaced by something impossible. The wild, overgrown jungle path where I had fallen was now a wide, well-kept dirt road. In front of the temple, where there had been nothing but weeds and dark trees the day before, stood 2 or 3 small wooden shops. Tall, modern street lamps powered by solar panels lined the pathway. Where am I? I stammered, rubbing my eyes that I looked at the people standing around me. They were tribal villagers, but their clothes were entirely different. Many of them were wearing thick, branded winter jackets that looked brand new. In their hands, some of them held sleek, modern smartphones, devices that shouldn't even have a signal in this remote forest. My mind desperately searched for an explanation. Had I been carried to a different village while unconscious? No. I looked to the right. The massive, ancient banyan tree was there. The dried-up stone pond was there. The crumbling, moss-covered steps leading up to the temple of Ma Mongala were exactly the same. This was Kaliapani. But it was a Kaliapani that had somehow leaped 20 years into the future overnight. Before I could panic, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Eki Babu. What are you doing out here at this hour?" I spun around. Walking toward me was the priest, Vishveshvar Thakur. But he was no longer the ancient, dying figure with the cotton-white beard I had seen in the cemetery. His beard was once again dark, his face healthy, his eyes clear and full of life. He looked exactly as he had 2 days ago. He grabbed my arm with a surprisingly firm grip, his voice a panicked, urgent whisper. "You have come at the wrong time, Babu. Before something terrible happens to you, you must come with me inside the temple." As he dragged me toward the stone steps, a loud commotion broke out near the edge of the field. A crowd of villagers had surrounded a man, shouting in anger and striking him with heavy wooden sticks. I couldn't see the man's face, but his voice echoed across the clearing, a high, frantic wail of absolute terror. "They are standing outside the field," the man screamed, thrashing on the ground. "They are standing in the shadows. They are calling my name." "Thakur Mashai, who is that?" I asked, trying to pull away to help him. "Why are they beating him? He is clearly out of his mind." The priest did not look back. He dragged me up the steps and into the cool, dark sanctuary of the temple, stopping directly in front of the silent, black stone statue of Ma Mongala. He let out a long, heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging with a deep, ancient exhaustion. "I warned him," the priest whispered, his eyes fixed on the goddess. "I warned him so many times. During the night of the festival, you must never cross the boundary of the field." But he did not listen. "Who is he?" I demanded. The priest turned his head, his gaze burning into mine. "His name is Arindam Das Patnaik. He was a government officer, sent here to survey this land, just like you. He was an educated man from the city. He laughed at our gods. He laughed at our boundaries. And now, his soul is trapped between the ticks of the clock. He is a madman, doomed to see his own shadow walking through different times." A wave of icy terror washed over me, so intense that my legs nearly gave out. Arindam Das Patnaik. That was my full name. I looked back out toward the field. Was the screaming madman on the ground? Me? A future version of myself, broken and battered, beaten by the very villagers I was trying to help? This is impossible, I whispered, backing away from the priest. I am Arindam. I am the only surveyor here. There is no one else. You do not understand, Babu, the priest said, his voice dropping to a low, solemn pitch. The festival of Ma Mangala is not just for the living. On that night, the spirits of those who died in these woods, the ghosts, and the ancient shape-shifting entities we call the Gandharvas, the Vaforms, all descend to worship. They walk among us, sharing our space. Their bodies are as cold as winter ice, and if they catch you outside the boundary of the field, they will drag you into their world, a world where time has no meaning. He grabbed my hand again, pulling me out of the temple. We must go. The loop is closing. I must get you back to your camp before you are trapped here forever. We hurried down the temple steps, rushing past the cemetery path. But as we ran, I froze. The crude bamboo fence was gone. In its place stood a towering, solid gray concrete wall, enclosing the graves completely. Painted across the rough concrete in dark, drying red pigment were dozens of human handprints, a silent, horrifying testament to some ritual that had taken place in the years I had missed. Suddenly, the old priest stopped, turning to face me. Go back, Babu, he shouted, his voice echoing with an unnatural, booming force. Go back to your own time. With a violent shove, he threw me backward. I fell through the air, tumbling straight into a thick, swirling ring of white fog that had materialized out of the dirt road. As the mist consumed me, I saw the face of the madman one last time. He was looking directly at me, his eyes wide with a terrifying, absolute recognition. When I opened my eyes, the bright morning sun was gone, replaced once again by the heavy, suffocating darkness of night. I was lying on a damp bed of decaying leaves, the smell of wet earth and wild mushrooms filling my nose. Suddenly, a heavy earthen pot shattered against a stone right next to my head, splashing a sweet, sticky liquid all over my face and chest. A man let out a sharp, terrified shriek, stumbling backward in the dark and falling flat on his back. Who's there? I gasped, wiped the sticky fluid from my eyes. It smelled of raw, fermented palm sap. The man scrambled away from me on his hands and knees, his breathing coming in ragged, terrified gasps. In the dim starlight, I could see he was carrying a sharp curving knife tucked into his waist. He was a local sap collector. Babu? The man whispered, his voice trembling so violently his teeth chattered. Are you human? Or are you one of them? I am human. I yelled, struggling to sit up. I am Arindam, the government surveyor from the camp. What is happening? Where are we? Realizing I was flesh and blood, the man crawled back toward me, his chest heaving as he pulled me up by my collar. His hands were ice cold and slick with sweat. We have to leave, Babu. We have to run now, he hissed, his eyes darting frantically toward the towering black silhouettes of the palm trees around us. The forest. It has come alive tonight. I went to the palm garden near the temple to collect the sap pitchers I hung this afternoon. I wanted to gather them before the bullock cart arrives at 4 in the morning to take them to the market. He pulled me behind the massive trunk of a wild banyan tree, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper as he recounted the horror of his night. I climbed the tallest palm tree at the edge of the temple field, he whispered, clutching his chest. The village was quiet. The festival puja had just ended, and the lights had been put out. But as I sat high up in the branches, preparing to lower my pitcher, I saw them. Blue lights, Babu. Not yellow like torches, but a cold, pale blue, drifting through the fog toward the temple grounds. And there was no sound. No footsteps. No rustling of leaves. He swallowed hard, a tear cutting a clean path through the dirt on his face. I looked down through the mist, and I saw human shapes walking across the field. But as they passed directly beneath my tree, the fog cleared for a second. Babu. They had no legs. Their bodies simply ended at the waist, floating a foot above the grass. And then, the temple doors creaked open on their own. The earth began to shake. I watched in terror as the stone statue of Ma Mangala began to grow. She rose up, 8 feet tall, her long black hair sweeping across the stone floor like a nest of angry serpents. She stepped down from her altar, her massive stone feet making a sound like a collapsing mountain with every step. And then, she laughed. The sap collector covered his ears, his body shaking with the memory. A booming, metallic laugh that shook the very leaves on the trees. A flock of crows and monkeys screamed in terror, flying blindly into the dark sky. I was so terrified I lost my grip and slid down the trunk, tearing the skin off my chest and palms. I ran, Babu. I ran without looking back, but I could hear heavy, crushing footsteps chasing me through the dark. A voice whispered right in my ear, "Don't look back." And then, I tripped over you. Before I could reply, a chorus of angry screams and chaotic shouting echoed from the center of the village. The sound was a mixture of human fury and absolute, primal fear. "Come," I said, a strange, reckless curiosity taking over my fear. "We have to see what is happening." We crept through the thick, thorny undergrowth, making our way toward the village square. But as we reached the edge of the clearing, the world shifted once again. The modern, tin-roofed houses and paved roads I had seen earlier were completely gone. In their place stood a cluster of ancient, primitive mud huts with roofs made of decaying dry leaves. In the middle of the empty dirt square, a massive crowd of villagers had gathered, holding flickering bamboo torches. Standing in the center of the crowd were 3 men. 2 of them wore outdated khaki police uniforms with heavy rifles slung over their shoulders. The third was a government official, clutching a thick leather ledger to his chest. They were arguing violently with the villagers. "You must clear this land," the official shouted, his voice cracking with tension. "A massive chromite mine has been discovered beneath this forest. The chief minister has ordered the excavation to begin at dawn. This is for your own good." But the villagers did not move. They stood in a tight, silent semicircle, their eyes glinting with a dangerous, quiet anger in the torchlight. Suddenly, a young man stepped forward from the crowd. He wore a simple white dhoti, a bright red tilak smeared across his forehead, his eyes dark and burning with an intense, quiet authority. It was the priest, Vishveshvar Thakur, but he was young, his face smooth, his beard short and jet black. He could not have been more than 25 years old. "You cannot dig this soil," the young priest said, his voice carrying an eerie, hypnotic weight. "The land you want to desecrate belongs to the ancient ones. It is the resting place of the forms. If you do not leave before the sun rises, the goddess will claim your souls as payment for your greed." The government official scoffed, waving his hand in dismissal. "Enough of your tribal superstitions. The work will begin on government orders. Move aside." But before he could step forward, a woman in the front row of the crowd let out a horrific, high-pitched shriek. It was not a human sound. She fell to her knees, her body convulsing violently, her head thrashing from side to side. When she looked up, her eyes were entirely, shockingly red, devoid of any white. "Stop," she roared, her voice a deep, overlapping chorus of multiple voices that shook the dust from the thatched roofs. "Leave this place, or the earth will swallow you whole." Panic erupted. One of the police officers panicked, raising his heavy wooden baton and striking the woman across the shoulder. In an instant, the crowd surged forward. Torches were thrown, sticks and stones flew through the air, and the square turned into a chaotic, bloody riot. But as I watched the violence unfold, my eyes fell on something that made my blood run cold. Standing perfectly still amidst the screaming, fighting crowd were several tall, pale figures. They did not fight. They did not scream. They simply stood there, their heads slightly bowed, their eyes completely black. The chaotic villagers and panicked police officers ran directly toward them, but at the last second, they would unconsciously veer to the side, cutting a wide path around the silent figures as if they weren't even there. One of the dark-eyed figures slowly raised its head, its gaze locking directly onto me where I stood hidden in the bushes. A cold, mocking smile spread across its lips. A sharp, metallic toll of a temple bell rang out, echoing across the hills. The world plunged into a brief, terrifying instant of absolute darkness and freezing cold. When the light of the torches slowly flickered back to life, the riot was gone. The screaming villagers, the police, and the blood-soaked dirt had vanished. The square was completely empty, silent, and covered in a thick layer of white frost. Only the young priest, Vishveshvar, stood in the center of the clearing. He was slowly clapping his hands in a rhythmic, hypnotic pattern, chanting an ancient tribal mantra under his breath. Scattered on the frozen ground around him were a few motionless, unconscious bodies of the government officials. I stepped out from behind the tree, my body trembling so violently I could barely stand. Who are you?" I whispered. "Where is the old priest? Where is the village?" The young priest stopped his chanting, turning his calm, dark eyes toward me. A soft, sad smile touched his lips. "Do not worry, Babu," he said quietly, his voice identical to the old priest's, yet smooth and young. "Your colleagues are not dead. They have only fainted. They will wake up in the morning, and they will leave this forest, never to return. But you are Vishveshvar," I stammered, tears of frustration and terror welling in my eyes. "I spoke to you this morning. You were 60 years old. Your beard was white." The young priest shook his head slowly. "You are mistaken, Babu. My name is indeed Vishveshvar Panda. But I am a perpetual celibate. I have no children, and my father died 10 years ago. The year is 1986. The chief minister those men spoke of has only just begun his term. You have slipped through the cracks of the goddess's veil, Arundum." He walked toward me, his hand reaching out to gently touch my shoulder. His fingers were warm, a stark contrast to the freezing air around us. "The old man you saw in your time. That was me, decades from now. And the madman you saw being beaten in the future. That is the shadow of what you will become if you do not leave this place. You have crossed the boundary of the field, Babu. You have looked into the eyes of the forms. But the goddess has granted you a rare mercy. She is letting you go back." He pointed toward the narrow forest path leading back to the camp. "Go, Arundum. Run as fast as your legs can carry you. Do not look back, and keep the name of Ma Mongala on your lips." I didn't ask any more questions. I turned and ran. I ran through the dark, thorny bushes, ignoring the branches that clawed at my face and tore my clothes. In the distance, I reached the cemetery. The gray concrete wall was gone, the bamboo fence was back, rotting and covered in wild vines. Right in the middle of the path, a thick, swirling ring of white fog blocked my way. I closed my eyes, screamed the name of the goddess, and jumped headfirst into the mist. I woke up with a gasp, my lungs burning as if I had been underwater for minutes. Cold, heavy rain was pouring down from the dark sky, washing the sticky palm sap and dirt from my face. I was lying in the mud right next to the cemetery platform. With the last of my strength, I dragged myself to my feet and stumbled toward the lights of the government camp. When I burst through the door, my clothes soaked, my body shaking with fever and panic, the entire camp staff jumped to their feet. Sitting in the corner, calmly sipping a cup of tea, was the old priest, Vishveshvar Thakrar. His beard was once again gray and black, his face lined with the deep wrinkles of a 60-year-old man. "Sir," my lead assistant gasped, dropping his clipboard in shock. "Where have you been?" "We've had search parties and local police combing the forest for you for 3 days. We thought a wild animal had dragged you off. We were preparing to file a missing person report in the morning." Three days? I whispered, looking at the old priest. "But I was only gone for a night. I met the young priest. I saw the riot. I saw the mining officers." The staff looked at me with deep concern, whispering among themselves about head injuries and delirium. But the old priest slowly stood up, placing his cup on the table. He walked over to me, looking at my mud-stained face with a quiet, solemn understanding. "Let him rest," the priest said to the staff in a firm, commanding voice. Then, he leaned in close to my ear, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "I told you, Babu," he murmured. "I have no children." 35 years ago, during the mining riots, a man who looked exactly like you appeared in my village square, screaming about a future with solar lamps and modern phones. I told him to go back to his own time. That man was you, Arindam. You have finally returned. Many years have passed since that night. The year is now 2019. Kaliapani has completely changed. The concrete cemetery wall is there, just as I saw it. The solar street lamps are there. The modern roads are shiny and paved. I still work here, a quiet, older man who keeps to himself. But every year, during the night of the festival of Ma Mangala, I perform a sacred, silent duty. I stand at the edge of the festival grounds, my eyes scanning the crowd, watching for anyone who attempts to wander near the dark forest path. And if I see them step too close, I grab their arm and whisper a warning they will never forget. Because some boundaries are never meant to be crossed. And some doors, once opened, can never be shut again.